Welcome to TerraceTruthTalkin. I'm Joanna Bonaro, and today I have two wonderful women with me to talk about psychological fitness or emotional fitness as one of our categories. And returning is Martine Byer, who is a psychotherapist who maintains a private practice for teens and adults in New York City, and who had our most popular podcast in season 1, talking about her book, Sex and the Single Parent. So welcome, Martine.
Thank you.
We wanted to have her back because she has another wonderful book that we're going to talk about today. What to do instead of what you're doing, developing a personal toolkit with choices to navigate relationships. And also to help us along the discussion is another wonderful woman, Teri Meisner, who is a certified Jin Shin Shitsu practitioner who teaches health and wellness workshops in corporate, medical, and institutional settings like, I'm so impressed, the UN and Ronald McDonald House, among many other places. So welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So Martine,
Yes.
why don't we start this episode today and tell us about why you wrote this book?
I wrote the book because I was working with a lot of different people who understood everything about why they were choosing a certain behavior. For instance, overeating. They didn't want to overeat, and yet they felt compelled to overeat. So they were kind of locked into this strategy of seeking comfort, and in this case with food. It could be shopping, it could be relationships, plenty of those, where people get just compelled to a certain behavior that they know isn't so great for them. And how do you get out of that? Otherwise, you're kind of like a prisoner to yourself. So the understanding didn't change the behavior because the wiring is such that seeking food or relationships, that aren't necessarily so great for you, or over shopping, is seeking comfort, and that gets wired in with those behaviors. So seeking comfort is a terrific behavior, is a great choice. It's a terrific motivation. The wiring to do something that doesn't work for your life is not your fault. That's the most powerful thing, I think, when I tell people that, because there's a lot of shame when people...
Well, it's a relief when you finally hear, it's not my fault.
Yes.
Or you're shocked at first, right? Everyone probably says to you, what do you mean it's not my fault?
Right, because people don't understand or are not taught that you basically keep wiring in a behavior. So the strategy when you first chose the behavior worked well. Maybe it was comfort and it was good. And then it's overdone. So if they understand that they're kind of habituated, like they're just crappy habits. Like this kid came to see me and she said, I'm so OCD. I said, who diagnosed you OCD? She goes, well, I just know I am because I do this, I do this. I said, you've got a lot of crappy habits. I don't know that I would bump you up to OCD. Mm-hmm. And the habits are not your fault. These are things you've chosen that were a good idea at the time and are being overused. It's like the old records, stuck on a groove, mm-hmm. and it just keeps ticking and ticking. So I just was looking for ways to get people out of something because the talking, I felt like as a person, a helping person, a practitioner, a clinician, it's like you can talk these things over and over again, which, by the way, re-imprint people. So you keep talking about it, and it's like digging a ditch on the same behavior, mm-hmm. So that's
they talk about, I've read articles,
mm-hmm.
I can't in any way expound knowledgeably, scientifically, in terminology, but where the chemical reactions in your brain, you create almost these thought grooves.
That's right.
And so you literally have to exercise and retrain your brain to rethink. And we'll touch more upon that.
Yeah, exactly what it is. It's such a simple concept, and it just like really relieves people, because what to do instead of what you're doing. Most people, if you're suffering, if you're overspending, if you're overeating, if you're over-talking, if you're over-running, you want to change the behavior, but you don't know, and you might know what you want to do instead, but how do you get yourself to be able to do and choose a different behavior. So it's really, the book's kind of like a training manual of when you're stuck in one habit, how do you rewire the brain to get into a different habit?
So you talked about emotional shifting.
Right.
And that's what you mean by that?
Yes.
Emotional shifting, how to bring about the best possible outcome?
Right. So a very simple one before I trained for me was I used to go to the gym, and most evenings at one point in my life, and then on the way home from the gym, I would pass a store, and I would go in and I would buy a very small bag of potato chips, which I would resist eating. I was resist eating the entire package, and my doorman was eagerly waiting. Oh, you've got potato chips for me. I'm thinking like, why am I doing this?
It's your reward.
Well, you kind of crave a little salt.
Your caloric reward.
Right, but then I didn't feel great about it, and so I made this decision not to pass the store. So I actually walked around a block, and I realized that by the time I got to my corner, I didn't have the craving anymore. Now, after I've studied what we know about the brain, is that when you get a firing of a trigger, it lasts about 2 minutes. If you create an interrupt, or what I've called a trigger shifter, basically you're keeping the neuron of the old habit, the neurons in the brain, which are signals, I want, or, I need. You're basically not feeding that, and you're moving to another habit, which for me was the walk and the expanding time. So I've got that 2-minute period. I've gotten through that. I'm at my corner. I don't have the craving. I've essentially, by choosing a different behavior, just created some practice, some exercise for new neurons in my brain. So when the craving fires, I can begin to crave a little bit of walking instead of the potato chips. It's just that simple. If you want to break an old pattern, an old habit, you choose a new pattern, a new habit. And those are the trigger shifters that I give people.
So if I want to stop eating at 9 o'clock at night because I really want the chocolate donut.
Right.
First it would be don't buy the chocolate donuts, but let's say you did.
Right.
Then don't get up from the couch, go to the kitchen and get it. Get up from the couch and maybe do jumping jacks, or if it's nice out and not freezing, take a walk around the block.
Right.
And at first it will seem odd.
Right.
But then what you're saying is you're reintroducing new impulses in the brain.
Exactly. You're going to get your brain to fire differently. The more I use this metaphor or analogy in my practice for people. It's like if you work out and you are building your biceps and you only build the left arm, it's going to be very strong. So that's the impulse for the donut. Or if you keep doing it, very, very strong.
Yeah.
If you refuse that, refuse and refuse to the other arm, like refuse it to a habit and build up the other arm, which is essentially saying yes to no donuts. I don't even use no. I use yes, because every time you say no, there's a yes in it. So you're saying yes to wanting to be more comfortable physically, have less sugar, be healthier, those types of things. So you keep choosing the new habit. And the first time I discovered it again was before the training. Somebody in my family was very ill, and I used to worry. And what's the new test going to be? And the outcome was not going to be good. But in the meantime, the person's here, and so you want to be in life. So I'd be on the subway, and it would be my mind would go to, because worry is a horrible habit for human beings, because we're very fear-based people in order to survive. And so we worry as a way to ward off a bad behavior, but big surprise, doesn't do anything, makes it worse. But there we are. We've evolved this way so far, but we can now change some of that. So every time my mind would worry, and I'm telling you, like every time I practiced it, like what would happen, I was on any place I was, and I would think, I'd get that sinking feeling when you feel like you're going to get bad news, and I would basically interrupt it. It's a trigger shifter. I would rub my hands together, and I created a sentence of what I wanted it to be. It's peaceful. It is loving. I didn't even say I want it to be peaceful, loving. It is peaceful. It is loving. And I would find myself doing that at the beginning, like many times a day. So I started to share it with clients who were pretty much locked into these old habits that weren't serving them. And they go, wow, that's like, but you have to do that a lot of times. So I said, well, I'm currently doing it 20 times a day for about 10 seconds each. So how many minutes a day is that? And how much release do you get from it? I mean, I didn't tell them the content of why I was doing it. I was just telling them I was changing my habits. But it worked. And, one of the chapters in my book is called Ungripping the Grip.
I love that. I love that term. I was going to ask you about how to reduce the intensity, ungripping the grip.
Exactly, because we get gripped. Like the thought would come, and I would be like, prison, I'm in prison. But until I knew another strategy to get out of it. And so you really just move your mind someplace else. For a lot of us, you need another sensory experience. That's why the touching and the rubbing for me, that reminder. The push, like you were saying, the jumping jacks for you, it's going to be another sensory experience. It's movement, it's sound, because your feet are going to be tapping on the floor when you come down. Your breath, you're going to be using your breath differently. That gives you a lot of release of the craving hormone. So you basically, when you do an other sensory behavior, you're shutting off the faucet of the chemicals that go along with the craving.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a really simple concept. Just do something else, and it's a shifter.
Right? But you have to be aware enough to say, okay, now I'm going to do something else.
Right. You have to choose it.
You have to choose it.
Yeah.
You can't say, oh, I'm going to choose it, but no, I'll do it tomorrow. You have to actually choose it, because that's the human tendency too.
Right.
I'm really comfortable here, and I really want my chocolate donut, and okay, I'll do it. I know I have to do it. I want to do it.
Right.
I want to break the habit. I'll do it tomorrow.
Right, but then you don't feel so great.
Right.
That's the thing. And then so the other question I ask people is, or I give them to ask themselves, do you want to be doing this to yourself right now? If the answer is no, what is your next best choice? And that, I have this male metaphor for like changing lanes on a highway. So if you're gripped, you're in gridlock, do you stay in that lane? Or if you have an opportunity to change to another lane, do you change to the other lane? So I think the nice thing about these ideas and the idea of the book is that there's always something to try if you want to shift a behavior.
What I also liked is the positive outcome, which is in a way, it's not negative where, I have to stop what you said, I have to stop doing this. I saw it as the outcome, or do I want to really feel this way? How do I want to feel? There's a reward at the end of changing the behavior.
Right.
So it's actually changing a negative into a positive, because now you're concentrating on the reward, which is, if I don't have the donut, I'm actually going to feel better about myself.
See,
and proud of myself.
Correct. Yeah, that's the yes in the no.
Right.
So I was working with someone who had a terrible drinking problem, and it became kind of a spending problem too, because he'd go out to bars a few times a week, and it was pretty costly. And he had, it's peers and it's this, it's social. But I said, if you say no to that, what will you get out of it? And, I could travel. I'll have more money for this or that. So every time you say no, even if you just go out one night a week, make that decision, you're saying yes to another kind of freedom. So when you start to imprint that for people, it's like worth your while. People don't make any real change unless it's worth it to them.
Mm-hmm.
So if people can feel successful in some way, and he was also had a lot of trouble not drinking. We got him knitting, believe it or not.
Which is a great suggestion, because you're getting more
bilateral.
than one sense, bilateral stimulation, and also more than one sense involved, because it's movement, it's texture, it's tactile. Plus, he's probably going to have to watch with his fingers where they're going.
Right.
So it's a great way to interrupt.
Complete shift of focus.
Pattern interrupt.
Right. So we would prescriptively say, well, this week when he comes into his house, that was a trigger moment. Sometimes your trigger moment. Even when he was with somebody in the home, when you come in, it felt like a lonely time for him, which that hit a lot of different neurons for him. So the pattern that we created was he was going to come into the house. Well, first he was going to, by the way, he's a very brilliant guy. He was a professor. And he was going to go to Duane Reade and read People magazine for 10 minutes because that actually completely relaxed his mind. So it primed him to go to home.
It was non-cerebral, huh?
It was so non-cerebral, and it was so like out of the realm of what he was doing with academia. So he would do People magazine, and then he'd go home, and he would make himself, and this is kind of when you're talking about the donut, the pull to the donut is strong, so the pull to like getting a drink was strong. He would make himself sit down, picked music, put on the headphones, and he would knit. And the thing I helped him to do was...
I love that image. That's wonderful.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the multisensory use of all of that. It's fantastic.
And I give people something else, which is look at your watch and try to, get past 5 to 10 minutes. If you enjoy doing it, go longer. But when you're shifting a behavior, like a small amount of time can seem long at the beginning. Like if you're just doing breathing, it can. So if you just know and watch and use your watch, especially, you have a sense of like the frame, kind of and so. So it was great. So I hadn't mentioned bilateral stimulation, which is a big part of the shift. When I say other sensory, anything you can do with moving your body out of sync, right hand, left hand, tap your left knee, your right knee. I have people doing this in business things when they're really in conferences and they're even for an interview, if their hands aren't being seen, lightly tapping one side of the leg, then the other.
Yeah, I read about that, and I thought that was fascinating, and it does work.
It does work. It's incredible, actually.
It is pretty
all these
incredible.
Practices are so accessible if you know where to find them. And with Martine's book and people talking with podcasts like that you're providing, which is a great service, people are getting to know what these techniques are and be able to use them for self-care.
Yes.
How fabulous is that?
Yeah, because I've known Martine for over a decade now, and we hit it off she's also a very successful playwright and very creative, and I was in one of her plays. And I think at that point, one of my parents was ill, and I was going through a problem, and Martine has always been very helpful, giving me hints.
Anything I know. Anything I know, I share. That's also why I wrote the book.
But it does work,
yeah.
and that's also, all kidding aside, we say you have the most successful podcast, we want you back, but bottom line is the woman knows what she's talking about and is very
Empathic.
Empathic. But Martine also has a wonderful sense of humor.
Wonderful.
Which is a great way to calm people
Thank
down.
you very much.
Yes.
I mean,
but you know what I want you to want you to tell everyone, because I read the book, and you give a lot of examples of what a trigger is, and then what are trigger shifters.
Right. And
you talked about one client that you told her to do a headstand. Right. I just thought that was magnificent. I'm planning to do that myself.
I spent a lot of time on my head in my life. But I had a client, actually it was quite a while ago, and she became so desperate about relationship stuff. And it was a Friday, and we were talking and having our session, and she says, I don't even know how I'm going to get through the weekend like that. And at the time, I was doing a lot of yoga and different things. So I said, I don't know. I said, can you stand on your head? And she said, yes. I said, that time that it takes to align your body against a wall and stand on your head, you're going to get about 2 minutes of really an interrupt. I didn't even use those words at the time. It was just my instinct, like, what the heck can you do? I like to exercise myself. I've referenced it 3 times today. I do other things.
Mosaic. She does magnificent. Magnificent mosaic.
That's a fabulous art is a wonderful trigger shifter. If anybody has, like, little kids and their kids are all jazzed up, I have a chapter on kids. If you just take a long piece of paper, like that's going to go basically from one side of the head to the other side, about that long. If you don't, you can use regular 8x10. And you just give them colored pencils and have them talk to you while they're drawing back and forth, you can do it with them. That is a bilateral stimulation.
Like back and forth, meaning left and
like
right.
making rainbows. Yeah,
I
just
see.
like back and forth, one side of the paper to the other side of the paper. It will completely. It's so bilateral, and it's color. It's another activity. It changes focus. Your child will calm down. The other thing, and I did this with an adult. She came in, she's sobbing and sobbing after a job interview. She felt she didn't do well. I can't understand what she's saying. And so I stood up. I said, stand up and tell me about it. And I literally clapped my hand, and I put my palms together in the center of my body, and I just clapped from side to side, coming back to the center, right, left. And as we're doing this together, she starts telling me about it. She starts laughing because it's so silly. I said, just do it. And then I put my arm up, right, left, like, I'm doing like Saturday Night Fever. If anybody remembers that, or maybe we can go Camila Cabello, So she started laughing, and then she calmed down enough, and she told me about the interview, and then we could like look at what she did, and she was overwrought. Speaking of, internalizing and getting your neurons firing, she went to like getting very overwhelmed very fast, because that's what got wired in when she was a kid. She was overwhelmed and left alone a lot. So we were able to talk it really through. And then she came in the next time and she said, my boyfriend and I had a fight, and I said to him, stand up. And then they laughed, and they were able to get through it. And she said, now he wants to see you, but she said, I don't feel like sharing it. So that was really fun.
She became very protective of you, yes.
Yeah, really protective. But the thing is, the feeling also as a practitioner, as a clinician, to be able to have that tool, because when I first started in this work, there's no way, it just wasn't done. I mean, I was told not to use laughter. Laughter is a very big element of what I use. I wrote a piece that people can read online. It was published called This Is Your Brain on Laughter. And I literally give people, like, what's going to be your funny prescription this week, so that you can shift out of, sinking, because you don't want to sink. And what are you going to do instead? Should I tell you another example?
Yes, I want to hear. I mean,
Okay.
my New Year's resolution is to bring genuine laughter to myself and hopefully those around me. I'm not a comical person. I'm very serious,
pretty
as you
funny.
know.
Oh, you have a good sense of
I'm
humor.
inadvertently funny. I can't tell a joke to save my life.
Well, a straight joke, but you're pretty funny and a very good comic actress,
Thank you.
I must add.
Thank you, darling.
My,
But
my play was dark comedy.
yes, it was. It was so funny, but it was dark. But so far I think I've been successful, is to bring laughter every single day, not only to myself but to people around me. And even if I'm just laughing or smiling, it just lifts your entire day.
Well, it changes the hormones in your body, the feel-good hormones, and that's incredible.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the idea of the faucet. Laughter, this is your brain on laughter. Laughter I use as medicine. Laughter is medicine for the body. It's like a love deal, because it's happy.
So you're going to give us some examples.
Oh, yes. So another one I was working with, who very powerful in the world, very talented, does not matter, crazed about a relationship. You can go to the psychology of it, a very rejecting parent, mother, so that the boyfriends become I'm going to get the love this time, and becomes desperate. So she was looking at her phone, I mean, like probably 100 times a day. Did he call? What did he say? So I said, you remind me of, did you ever see Streetcar Named Desire? So I said, the pain that I'm feeling when you talk about this, that I'm feeling, you're feeling, is, do you remember Stanley under the balcony when Stella rejects him?
Yes.
And he's literally screaming, Stella! Like he's just a shrieking cat. So I said to her, go on YouTube. It's on YouTube. Just watch that scene.
Mm-hmm.
If you like it, put it on your phone. And every time... And I send people stuff. I'll tell you another one I sent somebody. an interrupt, a trick, which is the same thing as a
Yes.
trigger shifter. So she did. She put it on her phone, and the next session she came in. She was from Europe, and she had a funny. So I said, "How'd you do this week?" And she went, "Stella." It reduced. It's not magic, but you're basically going back to the thing I said originally, earlier in the interview. You're basically building in other wiring. You're building in another neural pathway that provides release, and, as Teri said, stimulates these really good hormones that are the feel-good hormones, which we need. So it's shutting off the crappy hormones, and it's just really mechanical in a certain way, do this, don't do this.
Right.
If you do this enough, you're going to get this result. So I give people prescriptions. I had a client who had a horrible colleague who was always trying to one-up her and everything.
Yeah, because I wanted to, so we've talking about someone who might have a small child, so you've given ideas on that, and this professor who had issues around drinking, and so that was a solution. So I want to, in a weird way, compartmentalize some of it so that it's clear to people who are listening, like, oh yeah, I have that problem.
Right.
And now this woman with the headstand was having relationship issues.
Right.
So we've covered that. Now, what example are you bringing up now?
Now this is in the workplace.
In the workplace.
I mean, the workplace, I gave you the tapping under the table.
Right, but give us another one.
So I'm going to give you another one for the workplace, or any place, really. So the client would come around, not the client, the colleague would come around and kind of go, well, I got this, or this person, basically saying like she was getting more perks. Mm-hmm. And, it's aggravating, and it was hard to shake off. So I said, this person, I don't know, for some reason I'm getting a feeling, you ever have a fly?
I remember reading this. Oh, guys, I love this. You got to hear it. You got to hear it because I'm using it. Do it.
So do you remember, like, a fly just comes and lands on your desk? I mean, you don't really pay much attention. What do you usually do? You kind of move your hand, you swat it away. I said, when this person comes around, how about just doing the motion? I said, you think it's silly, but actually the mind is prompted by physical, kinetic. Just do the little motion, like flick. Just do a little flick. I said, it's very useful in a lot of places. You just do a little flick.
Yeah, you do a little flick. It works.
It works. It does stuff. It's another thing to do instead of being there, like, completely entrapped in this bad feeling she was
But what I thought was brilliant was the fact that, if you read the book, and I really highly recommend you do, it's not a long book. It's very relatable. It's not a lot of terminology, so you don't have to worry about, how do I dissect this sentence. But that flick for me, I mean, you talk about laughter and movement and breathing and doodling. It's finding the right trigger shifter too, and that to me was brilliant because that really works for me.
That's the thing. There's so many, like when I said, one of the reasons I wrote the book, there are so many different things to try. You just keep trying things, and then sometimes something works, and then you need something else. I mean, you can use a color as a trigger shifter. You can use moving your mind to the ocean as a trigger shifter if you use it enough. Also, it's nice sometimes. I have people add it, have visuals around them. Put it on your phone, put it on your desk, have it on your laptop, have a little one in your wallet. You're continually seeing the color or the image. Mm-hmm. It's like the concept of Pavlov's dog.
I was just thinking that stimuli.
Yeah, it's a stimuli. So the dog hears the bell and he knows it's food. You're really imprinting a response, and if you're imprinting a response that gives you freedom and comfort, release, laughter, the positives, it's great.
Yeah, another thing, and I made the connection. I was doing it on my own, but I made the connection after I reread the book.
Right.
And anyone who knows me knows that I had a chow chow for almost 17 years who I was the love of my life and I was besotted by. Yeah. And I really do miss her. But on my Instagram feed, I have a lot of chow chows. So whenever something happens, perhaps during the day, that makes me a little nervous or what have you, irritates me, I literally go on to I do this. I go
Right.
on to Instagram.
Smart.
Because I'm not going to flick my chow chow away. And I go to the pictures of the chow chows, and I immediately smile. Immediately.
Right. Which really, one of the things about grief is that people also feel that heaviness, and it is. You miss people. Speaking of the picture, one of the interrupts or the soothers, maybe we can call it that for grief, is keep a picture, have a picture of the person around, exactly. And when I feel, I've had some losses, when I feel the missing of the person, I just look at the picture, I blow a little kiss, or I say, "Hi, kid," which reminds me of George Burns used to do that.
Oh, goodbye, Gracie.
Oh,
He went to
yes,
visit.
that's right.
He went to her crypt every day and would chat with her, even though he went on to other things. And he would just say, "Okay, kid, see you tomorrow."
Oh, that's a lovely story.
That
Did
is a
it for
great
Makes you feel so
story.
good.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Think about that love.
Yeah, to connect. I mean, you want to connect. You miss the person rather than being steeped just in the missing.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of commune a little bit, with the person. They're just like, there are alternative things to do. There are things to do that are different than what you've been doing, and what you've been doing. So, yeah. So, I have.
Well, let me ask you,
Yeah.
talking about the book,
Mm-hmm.
I love the cover of the book.
Oh, right.
So how did you choose the book cover illustration?
Okay, so the cover is somebody, the thinker, basically, a little thinker character, a little bit drawn differently, pondering, and over his or her head are hamsters in a wheel, not knowing what to choose, or decide. And so I chose it because we can be spinning, but there is something to do instead of what you're doing.
Got it.
So that's why I chose it.
Got it.
And it's funny.
It's
I hope.
funny. Yeah. No, it's humorous.
Nothing like a hamster's in a wheel.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you these techniques and just knowing these kinds of things, comforting people so that they know that their intentions are good and that if they're doing some things that aren't quite working, it's not their fault, is such a relief as a person in my position. It's a relief to the person receiving that information. So it's really been extremely liberating to have this, and the humor stuff is just great.
It's great. Yeah.
If you want to hear one more about couples, would you like to hear about a couple?
Well, yeah, I'm sure we all have relationship issues, so
Okay.
go for it.
Okay, so I have a colleague, this many years ago, who told this story, which I used recently with a couple I was working with. And so she was working with this couple, and they were doing well. They were coming more for, guidance and this and that. And then they went through a very bad patch where they were very aggressive, and they were screaming at each other in the office. And they loved the dog. She had the dog there if people liked to have the dog, and they did. They always loved Rufus. That was Rufus. So Rufus would, watch. He was watching their arguing, and she said he was kind of going back and forth. It's like a little 5-pound Yorkie watching like a ping pong game. And they're screaming back and forth, and they were sitting apart on a couch, and Rufus is looking, and then he jumps up on the couch in the middle of them and throws up. Yuck. Talk about a trigger shifter. So then one of the partners says, "Oh my God, we're not only making each other sick, but we're making the dog sick." So
That was a stimulus.
it was a shift. She said it was a turning point. So when I was working with a couple, I said, you need to have some type of signal, because you go to number 10, which is the hottest, and you need to be able to stop yourself when you're feeling, half that, because otherwise you're in the ditch. They both agree. See, that's understanding. You understand it, but you don't stop yourself because they're wired to be combative about it. So I was so I told them the story. And so, what word? And they have different animals, or connects with animals, so they chose something. But it's kind of like they'll laugh instead of, hopefully they'll laugh. because they don't want to be going where they go. But at that moment, the craving, the need to fight, to stand for yourself, sense of self, it's like your entire rational mind is gone. So, but if they have this little trigger shifter, so if it works and they like it, let's say they picked a zebra, just for kicks, I'll buy them a little zebra to like, hold up like a talisman. Hopefully it'll work. These things you try, you keep trying.
Well, that ties into the point you're trying to make about emotional shifting. You say you should say to yourself, how do I create a collaborative solution? Because you never get anywhere if you dig your heels in,
right,
and say, no, I'm not going to change, or no, I'm
out of
right,
here.
No, I'm out of here,
yeah.
and then it creates a continuation of, or a negation of a situation, or a human being.
Yeah, it's painful.
Yeah.
If you can smooth a jagged edge, people get stuck on pride, and there's a way, and then they sort of cut their nose to spite their face, like there might be something to get out of it, which the very least would be, let's agree to disagree. And I understand your position, but that's not where I am. It's not my take on it, but I see it's your take on it, and just part if it has to be that.
And you walk the talk, because I know Martine and I have a wonderful friendship for years and years now, but it doesn't mean we agree on everything. And sometimes we have conversations, and we just say, okay, we just don't agree. But we like one another enough to say, okay, this doesn't color our whole relationship. We agree to disagree. And what I loved with the book and this topic specifically is when you're talking about how to disconnect, you say, don't give it any power. Don't give it power. And you use the phrase, nobody wins unless everybody wins.
Oh, right.
And I loved that.
Yeah. The negotiation. Because that was a movie director example I think I gave. I knew somebody who had a low-budget movie.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he had this, I'll try to make it a shorter story. So he had this actress, and it was a low budget. They were in a house, small location, and they had the PAs, production assistants, and they were serving lunch. I guess the kids did it. Look, they're working 15-hour days. They want a break. He had a pretty well-known actress. I mean, she had a pretty good track record. Everything was fine. It was like a 10-day shoot. They're on day 7. And apparently this particular actress had some quirks. So the production assistant handed her the lunch, and apparently the dressing touched the potato or something like that. It was a bad habit. And she slams the lunch down and goes up to her room and slams the door. And he's thinking, God damn, I have to get the light, I have to get the shot.
Yeah, you have to get the light.
Now what am I going to do? And he makes the decision, and he goes upstairs, he knocks on the door, and he goes, I want you to know I am so terribly sorry that this happened, and it will never happen again. And I take full responsibility for this. And I completely understand. Whenever you're ready, if you're feeling up to it, we're set up. And she goes, Because I really want you to know I take full responsibility for it, and we will protect you around this. And just comforting her.
Over the salad dressing touching the potatoes? Something?
Over her throwing a fit, and what he needed was her to get back down there to do the scene,
right?
Because he didn't want to come in over budget, because especially
sure.
because he's a young director. And she says, it's like loosening up. And so she comes down and she does the scene, and it's fine. And when he told the story, I said, wow, that's very powerful of you. And he was practically like, bowing to me. Thank you, because he needed to get what he needed to get. He wasn't going to solve her emotional problem. I guess the shifter there was that he just decided to give her the thing he felt she needed, lots of empathy. Whether you find it rational, there was no judgment. It's like, what do I need? What are the elements? What do I need to do to accomplish it? And he did it. And by the way, he also spoke to the PA saying, like, I get it. I mean, he was a lovely guy. But it was very powerful because he basically shifted what he needed to shift. And didn't get into any power struggle with
For
her.
himself
And it's
and
very
for her,
powerful.
too, yeah.
And very powerful. And let her have her dignity, too.
True.
Didn't shame her about acting like a 2-year-old. It was a tantrum. She had a tantrum. You're not going to say to a 2-year-old, let's discuss why you wanted those lollipops when I told you couldn't have them. I mean, you can have a big body and a grown-up body, but when you look at people, they're developmentally very different ages. So, I mean, I've had 80-year-olds who were literally stuck at places at age 2 and 3 and throwing tantrums and panicking because they couldn't be without, i.e., mommy. And they never solved it. But the elasticity of the brain, you want to know what? With these techniques, they did. I thought I was going to have somebody like crazy glued to me for the rest of my life. Like I turn around and this person would, and she solved it.
That's fantastic.
She was something along the lines. I changed it because for people's
Of course.
privacy, but she goes, I'm alone, I'm alone, I'm alone, I'm alone. So what? I couldn't believe it. I couldn't, and that was a lot of this kind of practice stuff, different combinations of things, just building in different neural pathways.
So let me ask you, Teri, since you're a practitioner of Jin Shin Shitsu, thank you. Do you find in your practice that is it a similar approach? I mean, we're going to have a whole episode around what your philosophy is and what you do, but are there similarities here?
Absolutely. And first of all, Martine and I trained. I have lots of different practices that I work with. Jin Shin Shitsu happens to be my primary. But one of the things that Martine had talked about was the attitudes of worry and fear and sadness. And one of the core tenets of very simple Jin Shin Shitsu self-care exercise helps to bring down the temperature of those attitudes or emotions. So we use a combination of breath and light touch to change patterns, to shift behaviors, to bring people's awareness to another place simply, easily, just with those physiologically, mentally, emotionally, on all of those levels. But so, for example, if someone was stuck in the attitude of worry, which when I teach my wellness workshops, oftentimes worry, fear, anxiety, and sadness are the core emotions that run through people's issues. We have them hold their finger and breathe very simply. So the thumb in Jin Shin Shitsu represents the attitude of worry. And don't you know that babies physiologically, when they come out of the womb, they suck their thumbs to help with their digestion and to shift their change from being in a protected environment to being stimulated with all of these new sights, sounds, feelings, smells that they are surrounded with. And this gives them a way to calm their own nervous system.
Interesting.
Physiologically. And what we find is when you hold your fingers and breathe, changing the tempo of your inhale, making it longer, slower, and deeper, and slowing down your exhale, you're sending a signal to your nervous system to calm. Okay. Very simply. And
That's
with
great.
sadness, you hold your ring finger, and that helps to ameliorate feelings of sadness. Fear in Jin Shin Shitsu is the index finger. And the middle finger helps with anger, and no surprise, that's the New Yorkers' salute to somebody when they're upset or frustrated. They flip their finger at someone. And instead, Martine has this thing where she talks about grip it. Well, in Jin Shin Shitsu, you can gently, lovingly hold your finger and breathe, and that will help calm your intensity of the emotion in that moment. It'll interrupt the pattern.
Got it.
So there is a beautiful through line with these practices.
They complement one another.
Absolutely.
I use Teri's techniques in my practice. I've used it myself, I was at a place and I was feeling a little bit of anxiety, and the pinky holds the anxiety, and I just held the finger, and it eases your system. It's like your heart rate slows a little bit and your breathing eases. It's great.
And your muscles start to relax. It's really interesting. And like one of the things that Martine had talked about is the more you sort of practice and work that muscle, which is the stimulating that relaxation response, your body will relax much more quickly if you use it, if you practice it frequently. And that could be 2 minutes, 1 minute, 3 minutes a day. Very, very simple, so that you prime all of your senses to learn how to calm.
Yeah, Martine told me about you and what you practice, and I was fascinated by it. So I had asked Martine, "Do you think Teri can come today to be part of that
Yeah, it was
episode?"
great.
And then I said, "And I want to ask her if we can have a whole episode that is all about what you practice, Jin Shin Shitsu, and we are going to have Teri on in a completely different episode just to talk about that because it's fascinating and it works. Again,
It really works.
It works.
I mean, I use it as another skill set for people in my practice. I literally give them all the fingers that Teri just mentioned, and what they hold, and people use it. I mean,
And what's really great is that you can use these practices if you're 2 years old, if you're 80 years old, or if you're
great.
in between.
Or if you're in your effulgent years, like
In
we
your
all
effulgent
are.
years, that's right.
Martine, you also talk about how these trigger shifters and these interruption exercises, they're better than just talking. And I guess what this whole episode has shown is that talking and talk therapy is very beneficial, but these other practices are almost neurological.
They're efficient. Like the talking is attachment and the closeness, being witnessed, being held emotionally. I'm there, I'm with you. There are a lot of people suffer from that terrible disconnect of not being known, and so the narrative still has very much to offer. But that story I told about the woman who came in after the job interview, I couldn't even talk. I mean, she couldn't talk. So it's so great that there was something else to lace in. You can talk about a habit over and over again. Again, it's a way of not imprinting it. You can kind of feel like I move it all around, and I just do anything ethical that gets people where they want to go. And you need these other sensory techniques. There's no question about it. In my mind. You need other techniques like this. And they're fairly new in terms of being around,
I'd say that the techniques have been around for lifetimes, but I would
Sure.
say that the use of them in this setting is new.
That's what I mean. I mean, like the last 20 years, maybe?
Yeah, because people are getting finally more creative in therapeutic settings and trying to use whatever works, as you mentioned, in an ethical manner.
Right.
And how beautiful to be able to have these practices available to you. And plus, you use them so creatively, which makes practicing fun.
It's really a lot more fun. But the neurological part is the thing. You want to get at that wiring. That was the original reason why I started exploring other modalities. I'm trained, we won't get into it today, but maybe some other time. Maybe it's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and that's a whole other bilateral technique. And somebody who was so reactive to everything. I did one session with her, and her husband would say, "Did you forget to buy a container of milk?" And she would flip her lid. I bought the milk. I always buy the and so we did one EMDR session, and she came back. She was very much a New Yorker, and she said, "I don't know what happened. I knew I didn't do anything wrong." Like that. It was, it was so funny, and we couldn't get at that. She knew that she was overreactive. It just released. It was like magic.
Is that? I had one last question.
Sure.
This is also fascinating. Does that apply to? You wrote in your book about problematic personal psychology.
Yeah.
What is PPP factor?
Okay, so people, no two brains are the same, which we mentioned earlier. You and I are really good friends. We have some different points of view. I love
so
you.
what?
I love you. Yeah, so what? And we just don't have to hang out in those places.
Yeah.
But we're compatible in so
There's
many
a lot
other
of
ways.
commonality.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff. So the PPP factor, so when you come up against something that does really hit a place in you and rubs you the wrong way, and I can give an example of somebody who, her mother-in-law, and I have full permission to use this. I'll change it up.
I wanted to ask you, in-laws. I'm sure there are many listeners who who have in-law problems.
Talk about being triggered. So the mother-in-law, let's say, always talks about cats. So, and nothing else. And so there's no, the mother, like, for whatever reasons is how this woman developed, she was not able to take an interest and enter the world of either her daughter-in-law or her son at all. So it became a monologue. And so she would come in and talk about it, and we discussed how people form, and it's not about her, it's not her fault, all these things. So for the 10th time, or less, because she didn't see her that much, but the 6th time, she says, my mother-in-law is coming again. What am I going to do? I said, either use a trigger shifter or dress like a cat. Because there's nothing you can do. Maybe she'll. Maybe she'll. So I had given her a really good interrupt. Originally, I called it the pee-pee factor, because I had a family situation, and I said to a friend, wow, everybody's on good behavior. I said, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And she said, oh, it'll drop because everybody returns to their personal psychology. We all have a default place, which some we want to heal and get rid of that stuff. But people just go to the thing that there's a belief system. So so I said the pee-pee factor, and I said it's kind of like people in their personality. It's like an animal peeing on a fire hydrant and claiming their turf in their personal psychology. I said you might think of an animal peeing on how they do that to claim their territory, to mark their territory. When you're hearing your mother-in-law talk about a cat, just don't get into it. Just bring your mind someplace else. And she did that she was hysterical. She said, I'm just sitting there laughing inside. I laughed the whole time. She said, I couldn't believe it. See, if people use it, it's not like I'm a miracle worker. I offer this stuff. Some people really go for it, and they get relief. So that was the personal psychology. You're going to run up against triggers in people's personal psychology.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank both of you. To wrap this up, just in summary, ask yourself, this is from Martine's book, do I want to do this to myself? Where can I go from here? What do I want to feel instead?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So the book recommendation is What to Do Instead of What You're Doing by Martine J. Byer, Byer.
It's on Amazon, and it's also on my website, Martine Byer LCSW.com.
And you can download it on Kindle, which is what I did. And to close,
or get a hard copy if you want to mark it up and study.
Yeah, highlighting it. Yeah, I couldn't get it delivered in time.
I'll give you this copy.
And so I said, well, what am I going to do? I have to reread the book. Because I have to.
That's right.
Right?
You want to do
because
that
I know all about it from being a friendly, but to formally read the book, and I couldn't get it in time, so I said, all right, I'm downloading it on my Kindle. But I actually don't like that for books that are instructive, because I'm the type of person who I highlight and I write in it, and I write notes, and so now
this is your copy.
If you see this,
so.
Thank you. I have 7,000 papers because I'm old-fashioned.
Well, what
anyway.
to do instead is I'm going to give you this copy.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So we'll close with our motto.
Yep.
Remember, kindness counts.
Thanks.